relationship dramas, heterosexual relationships. We've never been into anything else.
Yeah, yeah.
But the male-female dynamic has always been one of our very big talking points. And I feel like, one, men don't pay attention, or in the Caribbean context, men don't necessarily pay attention to building strong relationships. We know how to get into relationships, but we don't necessarily know how to
sustain it.
Sustain a sturdy relationship. So that needs to be explored. But within that exploration is, like you said, holding the feminine accountable for some of the behaviors and for some of the things that they do to probably rub a man the wrong way.
Yeah. We would be, even when I lived in New York and you lived here in St. Kitts, we would speak like on a weekly basis, going through issue after issue, trying to gain a different perspective, you know what I mean?
I would be more diplomatic and say navigating the hurdles of a relationship.
Yeah, well, that's why.
Really problems because in the flow of a relationship you're gonna have ups and downs, you're gonna have hard discussions. So which came to the current discussion, the current conversation, and which is complacency.
Yeah.
And how does that affect the relationship in a negative way?
Yeah, it's almost like an anti-seduction, type of energy, because complacency ain't really something that's, seductive in the essence that it doesn't make you feel good about yourself. Sometimes when you kind of feel that complacency, it kind of is a turn off.
Yeah, and the definition of complacency is a quiet sense of pleasure or security, even while you're in innate danger. So you're complacent meaning
it's like almost like you don't catch this fish and you don't want to get no more bait, you know what I mean? So you just ain't really, feeding me the same energy that, we started off with, either by the way you're answering me, the way you carry yourself. You know what I mean? Like, complacency is for me is like, you go on your first date, even when you go on your first, like, home visit, right? And, so you might, me start ripping them in front of you and saying she comfortable.
no, it's bad.
Yeah, man.
And anything goes. Yeah, but even on a little bit deeper level, you find that when relationships to a very high standard, especially at the onset of a relationship. I think when you're in a relationship with someone, they have expectations and they're looking for you to be a certain type of way. And be it external stimuli or just you do things as a man that, the feminine doesn't necessarily agree with, or she feels like you could have done it better. Then she gets a little bit comfortable. And like you say, you spend time around somebody, you're with them all the time, so they think they know you. They start to try to anticipate your movements, anticipate your reaction.
Situations where on a, like, normal standards, like a person might not get where we're saying certain things to you, but because of the intimacy level, in a relationship, you allow certain things to get past. But how do you decipher, what to kind of put in check and what to hold back on?
Well, I mean, I think that in a relationship, it's just respect at the end of the day, and love is very different from respect. Because you could love somebody and not necessarily respect them.
Yeah, I said in a different way too. You could love somebody and don't like them, right? And the liking part is the respect part, right? Because love and like is two different things.
How can you love somebody and not like them?
You could love somebody, but you don't like the personality. Like,
so you have an emotional connection for them, like just based on where the relationship might have come from and things that they would have done in the past. You love them, but they've changed. So
somebody, right? You start to respond to them in that way, and it could become disrespectful.
No, that's true, because when you start to disrespect people, then you lose that value that you had for their perspective. So you don't necessarily want to listen to them anymore.
Yeah.
And then you become non-committal to the engagements, and it goes downhill very, very fast.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know where women like to, end that enchantment.
Well, I think one of the things is the feminine, because like we said, they're very emotional. So women have a lot of emotional triggers. And some of the triggers might have been established in previous relationships. So, she might have been in a situation with somebody before that would have been doing something on a consistent basis. Making a move that she didn't necessarily like. And you and her have a new relationship. You're not the same person that she was with before. But something you did reminds her of that previous engagement, and it just flies off the handle. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a romantic engagement previously. It could be something that her father used to do, or something that her brother used to do.
I was about to say that. You could go deeper into, the parenting, and not just the relationship, and she could feel as though everything is going right based on her standards, because that's the nurturing. But not realizing, that no, like this ain't right. This ain't the way to move.
Yeah.
This ain't the way you speak to somebody you respect.
Yeah. So like an emotional trigger would be, and just for the listening audience, everybody, thanks for tapping in.
Yeah.
An emotional trigger would be you as the masculine having a conversation with your woman, and she says something, or she's recounting a story to you. Let's say she is telling you about an experience that she had and the way that she responded to it. And you see within her description of the whole scenario ways that she could have done it better. And you take it upon yourself to try to tell her, okay, listen,
Good luck.
this could have been this could have been handled a little bit differently if you had done X, Y, Z. Instantly she flies off the handle. Why? Because she sees what you have said as criticism. She sees that you're telling her that she's wrong. You're not telling her that she's wrong, but that's an emotional trigger, because she probably might have had a parent that was very critical, hypercritical of all of her moves, everything that she did. And now you're in the relationship that get projected onto you as the man.
Yeah.
And it's hard to kind of cope with that.
Yeah, that's a very difficult thing to cope, and like reading and deep diving into books and stuff like that, and trying to understand life. I just use like analogies to try to navigate like those situations. So a lot of times I would picture myself as like, a rock in the middle of the ocean, right? And try to remain sturdy while the ocean is just flaring up and just waves crashing against me and stuff like that. And I have to remain firm.
Okay, so in the midst of the turmoil and the chaos.
Yes, yeah.
Very zen, very stoic.
Yeah, very stoic.
Cool.
You gotta stay cool as possible as a man, and because it's only gonna last like a storm gonna last a while, and then the water's gonna just calm right back down. But just know, once you're in this relationship, you're gonna have storms all the time.
Constant.
storms.
And what I found is, as men, we often feel like it gets better. It does get better, but we often feel like we are in a position to probably fix what we may see as deficiencies. And what I found, just through research and my own lived experience, is that it doesn't necessarily change in the way that you think it would.
Yeah.
It requires you to change as the individual and be more tolerant and to try to understand the feminine perspective, which is very difficult to do.
Yeah. I mean, in some way, sometimes you might wish that your wife, girlfriend, your woman, whatever you want to describe, would be easier, but you can't really wish for that. You have to adapt, basically what you're saying. And you can't even understand your woman. If you're trying to understand your woman, you're already losing the battle.
But when it comes to the emotional triggers, how do you feel a woman should handle her emotional triggers?
Oof.
If she even identifies them?
As the first thing, she has to identify those emotional triggers. Because in identifying them, then, she could always make a sidestep as they come and learn how to kind of manage them. Because the problem in the emotional trigger, the problem is always how you handle the situations like arguments. Like some people try to avoid arguments, try to avoid confrontation, but that's not the problem. It's how you handle those things.
Right.
It means those things are normal. And, a lot of experts would also say having that, back and forth in a relationship is healthy for a relationship.
But, the engagement would be healthy if it's done in a productive way.
Yeah.
But what we're talking about now is when it's not productive.
When it's complacent.
Yeah, because it gets complacent, so it gets disrespectful. It gets to the point where it's shouting, and it's almost like a tug of war. I'm trying to force my agenda, my objective, my perspective down your throat, and you're trying to do the same thing to me.
Yeah.
So, everybody loses.
So how do you handle that? As I'm asking.
It's a struggle, but I find that patience is the best way to handle any engagement.
Personally, because I can tell you personally, sometimes what I have to do is step away.
Yeah.
Right, step away, and on the street level, we like to say lock off. Just lock off your mind and go in a corner and just try to meds out. I might even touch base with you and have a conversation just to understand, and then come back to.
But even the step away is dangerous because women don't like to be ignored. So if you're in the engagement and she's trying to ventilate whatever she's feeling, how do you step away from that without it being disrespectful?
But hold on. Suppose you were the one is venting, and she's the one who's just like not really responsive to you venting.
Well, because
and that's a complacency. Because remember, at one point too, like say earlier in the relationship, and you had a problem, you had an issue, right? And you brought it up. There was more engagement. As time goes by, she was like, "Yo, what are you bringing this up again for? Like, we don't talk about this, right?" So, what do you do in that situation?
Well, one of the things that I've realized, and it might be one of my gifts, is I'm very deliberate with my speech. So even the way that I present myself in terms of communication, I choose my words very wisely because everything is subject to interpretation. So you could say something to a woman and she takes it completely out of context if it's not said the right way. Yeah. So, it takes some care and attention.
So let me ask you, with that care and attention, right, personally, you never receive a complacent remark right behind that care?
Oh, that happens all the time. But that then leads you into a disengagement of the ego as the man, because if you realize that, hey, this is a recurring problem, right? And those things, so those types of engagement, they might offend you, they might make you feel a certain type of way. Then the perspective that I choose to hold is this deep enough for me to want to sympathize? Or is it something that can be repaired? If it's irreparable, then we're just gonna have to go with separate ways. But if it's something that I feel like we could discuss, I also realize, okay, right now you might be in an emotional space, so right now this isn't necessarily the best time to talk about it. That's okay. Hey, listen. You seem to be feeling X. I can say this. I choose to not really go too deep into this. We could talk about it the next time. So, I mean, and what that does is it creates some distance and it allows people to blow off steam, because I'm sure you've had situations where you're trying to make a point, but because your partner is in that emotional space and they're so hyper defensive, they can't hear anything that you're saying. But 2 hours, 3 hours later, they might come back and say, hey, you were saying X, Y, Z, and I understand. But this
2 hours later, man, like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a
mean,
month.
Regardless, it happens at some point where they were kind of hearing you, but the emotions were preventing them from kind of deciphering exactly what you were trying to say or being fully receptive to it. So I think it's important to kind of give things a little bit breathing space. But I also think it's important for the feminine to identify where their emotional triggers lie. And I mean, to some degree, men have those things as well. So this isn't just an attack on the feminine energy. But for the most part, females appear to operate from that emotional space.
And I mean, they need to hold a little bit of accountability for the the part in the
in the interaction. Right. And where they might be seeing things from a skewed perspective because of that emotional trigger. And that's all that we're kind of asking for is, hey, hear me out, listen to what I'm saying. And therein lies the respect. That's the demonstration of respect. If you're willing to hear me, because I might be saying something to you and you don't necessarily agree with anything that I'm saying. But if you're willing to give me that space to fully articulate what I'm trying to say to you and analyze what I've said, and then you could tell me, hey, no, you're wrong.
So let me ask you, you think that calling like the masculine like toxic, you don't think that, do you think that's high time complacent?
Not fully, because I feel like within anything there is a grain of truth, and there are some men who operate in toxic ways.
But I mean to say though, we understand that part, but generalizing all, like, something like saying they don't agree with something that a man does is immediately toxic. That's a complacent back, because we don't have a definition for them.
No, but I mean, any generalization is wrong, because then you're using a broad brush, and broad brushes approaches don't necessarily work in any context, because you're dealing with human beings, and everybody different.
So that's more on the speech side, right? But what about on the more action side of complacency? Like, let's say when you like you're in a relationship, are you heading down that road, like you want to get into a committed relationship, so you decide to move in with each other and stuff like that. And when you first move into your apartment, your house or whatever, it's like, everything is on, like, this is my space, so it's always like cleaning up and making sure everything is right. You might go to work, let's say she's not working. You go to work, make sure everything is straight in the house. Vice versa, you might also, when she goes out on the weekends or whatever, you make straighten up and things like that, of that nature, right? But let's say like 3 months later, you start to realize there was a decline in making sure that everything is secured. Like you might be coming home from work, and let's say she's off, and you normally go home and there's a meal waiting for you, but 3 months later, when you reach home, there's no meal.
Well, I think as men, what we need to realize, and just as people generally, what we need to realize is, in any new engagement, you always meet the representative. So people always wear masks. Everybody wears a mask at some point. And when you get into a relationship, that female, and likewise the men too, they have a mask on, so they're putting their best foot forward all the time. It leads back to the kind of analogy where they say, what's done in the light or what's done in the dark always comes to light. So that's not the type of person she was, that always cooking, always cleaning. That was never her. That was never truly her. That was a lure. That was, like you said, the bait to catch the fish. So now, 3 months in, she's comfortable. She doesn't feel the need to cook all the time. I think, to some degree, it's fear. And I'm not necessarily fear, but I feel like, and this is just me personally, I feel like the feminine energy always pushes and tests the masculine. They always push boundaries. So that's a boundary. That's a line that she's attempting to draw in the sand to see if you are willing to accept it as the man. It's for you now to communicate to her that, hey, no, I don't think that's the type of relationship we should have. You know,
we should,
I really appreciate the way that things used to be, and is there anything that I could do to make it easier for you? But you know, this coming home and not meeting the house tidy or whatever the case may be, that needs to be communicated so that she understands fully. You know, that's not the direction you want to go in. Now, here's the thing: sometimes as men, we might see that kind of development, and as opposed to communicating it, we start moving different, and that's where the relationship starts to go downhill.
Well, even since we're talking about communicate, let me just communicate something clear to the ladies out there, right? No, we're not from the archaic type of thing, thinking that, you know, women have to cook and clean and all that. I know you guys might crucify us by using that as like a reference point, but no, we're not really from that, you know.
Oh, no. I'm willing to cook. I'm willing to clean. I mean, I'm a very tidy person. Like, I like things to be in order. Very meticulous when it comes to that part of things. So
don't misconstrue it, you know. We're just using that as a reference point.
No. That's not a gender role. That's not a gender role. Yeah. I don't think women are obligated to be in the kitchen or obligated to clean the house or, you know, it's nice.
It's nice, but that's what I said. Just understand, like when you make a sandwich and give it to me, it tastes totally different, man.
Yeah, man, because you're a nurturer. You care for me. So and I think that's what women should have. They care. Like, there are roles. I feel like, honestly, there are roles. If we're at home and you hear bam, 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 3 a.m, you don't necessarily expect your woman to go out and look to see who it is. Right? That's your responsibility as the masculine. You're the defender. So you have to go and check that scenario out and see if it's something that needs handling. Whereas if the children are sick, daddy can contribute, but mommy is usually the one to deal with the cold showers and the administering and the medication and all these other things because they kind of program that way, you know? I feel that way. But I mean, you know, I think, like we're saying though, when you're in those tense situations where you're having a heated conversation with your partner and you're going back and forth, it's important for you to create some distance from the situation. Because what tends to happen a lot is, okay, we're having a hard conversation. You don't agree with what she's saying and she doesn't agree with what you're saying. If you allow that to devolve, it gets to a place where somebody says something that you can't come back from. Yeah. You make an utterance and that's it.
That's it. And I think sometimes, you know, like we have women, sometimes they feel, you know, they don't necessarily cheat on their partner. They don't do anything, like, no real violation in that sense. They don't take actions, but sometimes the utterance alone could be the end of a relationship, you know, based on how you handle a situation, like how you repeatedly handle a situation.
Well, I mean, I've been told explicitly by a female one time, hey, I can't beat you in a fight. So I'm going to say things that are going to hurt your feelings. I'm going to say things that are going to make you have to respond to me. You know, it struck me as weird because I don't necessarily talk like that. I wouldn't necessarily say something to you that I don't mean.
Yeah. And I remember I had a similar situation where a female told me her flipping out keeps the balance in the relationship.
Yeah, you're too calm.
You know, she said something has to happen all the time. So she has to say all these things and be complacent to just see, but I realize that, you know, She wanted to just test to see if I still cared about the relationship enough to engage that. But, you know, for us and in the masculine, because it used to be a struggle dealing with that at a particular time. So, but I had to learn. And when she said that to me, it's just like, oh.
I think a lot of times too, it comes down to personality types. Because what I found is I'm very introverted, I'm very quiet, so I'm good in a quiet space. I'm good in my own zone, just, you know, with a book, reading, and I don't necessarily need to engage with you. We could be in the same house, and that's sufficient for me for a few hours. But women are a little bit different, and it depends on the woman. So I'm not saying all women are the same, but women are a little bit different. Attention is the currency. So, yeah, you know, so you have to tap in. You know, there's some women who, when they're home with you, they just prefer to be wrapped up all day. Or just sitting in a chair, sharing a movie, her foot or her legs thrown over you, and she feels comfortable in that space. But if you're in another room and she's in another room, some women feel like that's like something is wrong.
Yeah.
You know, they need that engagement, they need that reassurance.
They need to feel a pocket of silence.
Yeah, so I mean, it's for you as the masculine, I think, to get to know your woman. Get to know. But one of the things that I need to ventilate too is what I've found is, so we spoke about if you're communicating with your woman and so I just painted the picture. She's explaining a situation to you, something that she went through, and you are breaking it down and saying, hey, this is where you could have gone wrong, or this is probably what you did that didn't necessarily make that situation better. And they could get offended by that. What I feel is important is for women to understand your man isn't always going to agree with you.
Yeah.
That's not our responsibility. I personally don't feel like that's my responsibility. I feel like we could disagree. We should disagree.
Yeah.
We should have like hard conversations now and again. But it's the tone.
And you gotta keep the respect.
Yeah, the respect has to be there. So if I'm saying to you, hey, you know, the thing that you said to that lady, you should have never said it for XYZ reasons. You can't fly off the handle and start screaming and using certain words and, you know, becoming very aggressive. It doesn't work.
Yeah, I understand that because, you know, you could... It's funny how sometimes you speak to a female, in essence, and then you get a response that you would never imagine. Like, how did you connect those two things together? Like, how you get from, you know, like I had a situation in the past once where I was speaking to, you know, a female at the time, and her response to me, we was talking, having a conversation, and she shut down in the conversation. And, you know, I was like, hey, how you could, like, what happened? The dialogue has to continue. So how you could just shut down? You think, like, if you were in, like, a meeting with somebody, would you shut down in that sort of a way? Bang? No. You thinking, like, that's to create the engagement. But the response is, yeah, you know what? Thank you for telling me I'm not going to reach anywhere in life. Because you're saying I can't speak to people.
So you totally misconstrued exactly what you were saying. You know, and another thing is, it's crazy. And I mean, we have some part to play in it. So I'll give you a scenario, and this is a common scenario. Everybody gonna be able to relate to this scenario. Let's say you're out working, your girlfriend is home, and
before you,
she's home before you get home, and you get home and entering the house. You say to her, hey, babe, what do you want to eat? Bro, that's a cardinal sin.
Yeah,
that's a question.
Man.
That's a 45-minute discussion.
Yeah.
You know, because I find that there's a degree of indecision surrounding that specific question. What do you want to eat? So the response might be, oh, I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? Just give me a few options and then we can narrow it down. What do you want to eat? I tell you, may not choose something. And that could turn into friction.
Yeah.
And it often does. turns into friction
Mm-hmm.
because you might make a suggestion and
Yeah.
the suggestion that you made, oh no, they don't
Don't
want
want that. Yeah.
It's just like, okay, so what do you expect me to do?
Mm-hmm.
So should I just stay here tossing out suggestions to you? Well,
Yeah.
I don't understand.
And then the friction could lead to some complacent comments.
And then, so within that complacency, now you see something as simple as what do you want to eat could explode and become a massive beef
Yeah.
that lasts maybe a week or two.
Yeah, and everybody starve.
And so that's the importance of communication, because we should be able to read each other.
Not just the communication too, but now knowing your triggers, like why did that trigger you, to go and say like things after, like we're talking about eating, but you might go into some other like layer of information, things that you wasn't even aware of.
Yeah.
In from the response.
And so, and then these types of behaviors, they have a negative effect because, okay, so the complacency is manifested in conversations, the way that we communicate, right? And then it has some negative side effects that I feel like eventually lead to the end of the relationship. So you have a partner, and because over time you've noticed a pattern, there's this pattern of communication. Things are going a particular way, and every time I ask this question, I get this type of response. So then you choose not to ask that question. So you begin feeling like you can't freely be yourself.
Not me, man. I can tell you personally, I like rolling on eggshells. I like rolling on eggshells. You gotta be diplomatic and stuff, yes, but there's a certain level of, like, if it's too, like, touchy all the time, then you realize, okay, then you can't defeat that. There's no real way to kind of dance around that all the time. Otherwise, you'll be dancing forever.
Right, but what I'm saying is, what if there's a situation and it's a recurring thing? So it's let's say it's a habit that your partner has, something that she does, and you've tried to highlight it a few times. Every time you try to highlight it, again, it comes back to the trigger. So she feels triggered, and it becomes an argument. Now, it's something that I wouldn't say insignificant, but it's small enough that you feel like, okay, it's okay for me to ignore that. I'm not going to study it.
What do you do?
No, not what do you do. Then that could be one of those things where you don't like it. You're in this relationship, but there's something happening that you don't like. But you're making a conscious decision to ignore it, or to walk around it, or to sidestep it, like you say, right? That's not you truly being yourself.
Yeah, if I find myself in a position where I have to ignore, like, my partner. No, man, if I find myself in that position, I've done it. End the relationship.
Okay.
Because, as a man, you got to be, like, the masculine. I take responsibility sometimes for the way that my woman responds to me, generally speaking. And, if my love don't penetrate that shell around her, then that means I ain't doing my job. And, I won't spend forever trying to convince her, forever in a space where I have to always, dance around a situation, because I have to be myself.
But then therein lies a problem, because sometimes people don't necessarily see what you're trying to say in the initial phases, but they have certain experiences that bring them around full circle to it. And they kind of understand, okay, this is what he was trying to explain to me.
Yeah, you understand that with patience and stuff like that, you have to, do that. But when you reach that point, everybody have, like a breaking point. Okay. Right? It's almost like you sign on for a job. And after a while, you realize, because relationships is a job, it's a lot of hard work, right? But sometimes you realize that things is not moving in the way that it should move. And no matter which angle you try to approach things, there's no winning, right? And then you realize, okay, then it's beyond me. Like, I can't, it can't go. So you go steady and keep trying to plant a seed in concrete.
Okay. So no planting seeds in
No
concrete.
plants in concrete.
Okay. So if you notice for the most part that the relationship looks like it's hit a dead end, there are certain communication barriers that you just know for a fact you won't be able to overcome. Then that's a dead note.
That's a dead note.
Yeah. Okay, sever ties.
Sever ties.
All right. One of the other things that I've noticed that happens, and it happens a lot with females. Men do it to some extent, but we're talking about the females here.
Yeah.
So,
And, we're talking about the females, and we want to let y'all know this is just two guys. We have our own opinions. In the future, we're going to have more people here to share their opinions, and we're going to have a dialogue back and forth. But we are not the authority figure on this topic.
it's just experience. It's just personal experience.
yeah,
It's just
and
things that we've seen, things that we've
experience. And then what we realize as well, from having conversations with each other, we really helped each other a lot in our own personal relationships. Whether it's intimate relationships or professional relationship. So we know that there are people out there who might have the same similar feelings, or need something to point them in a different direction in the way that they're thinking. Because I remember one time I was in New York, and a cousin of mine was seeking out advice, but he went to another family member, and the advice that he was getting, he revealed to me that he didn't really like the advice. But when I came around and he started hearing my perspectives, he had to come and seek me out to find out, to understand, because he wanted his relationship to work. He didn't want to end it.
Right.
So
So to the point, one of the things that I've realized that the feminine implies or leverages as a tool is playing little tit for tat games.
tit for tat.
Yes.
Yeah, man.
So tit for tat in the sense that, okay, I've touched on one of your emotional triggers and you perceive it as a slight. Okay, so you do me this. But here's what. You do me this, we were supposed to do this.
Yeah.
May want to do that no more.
Yeah, now we're tapping into resentment and revenge.
Okay.
And, not being able to forgive. That's what that is.
Yeah. But is it something that requires forgiveness? Because to me, forgiveness is for...
Major things?
Yeah.
You feel it's major things?
I feel like, it's deep-rooted type of infraction.
So you don't believe that the resentment that could be, from something deeper that has not yet revealed itself?
Well, that's the concept of the emotional trigger.
Yeah.
Something below the surface, something below your level of awareness that's happening there with her, in her psyche. But at the same time, she chooses to it manifests itself in these ways. And, that's rooted in narcissism.
Yeah.
That's definitely rooted in narcissism.
And there's a form of being toxic too, right?
Oh, yeah. So you remove something from the relationship every time you feel like things aren't going your way. Or if I say something to you that you deem as me being a little bit too critical, and you decide, okay, since you've said that, I won't say this anymore. Or I won't do this anymore.
Yeah, love lockdown.
Yeah, I won't ever ask you to do this with me anymore.
Oh, yeah.
And that happens often in relationships.
And that's complacency again. Because you forget, these are the things that brought you to this place where the relationship grew from out of doing all these things together.
Right.
And now you're taking it away.
What it does is it stunts the growth of the relationship.
Yeah.
Because now these are moments that we are now unable to share if you continue to maintain that type of thought process. And the thing about the human nature is when you do something consistently over a period of time, it tends to become a habit. So then it becomes a default, it becomes a defense mechanism. So, hey, he said this to me, here's what I'm going to do. We were supposed to go movies Friday, I can tell him he want to go movies. Because you see that as a way of getting back at me for whatever you've convinced yourself that I've done to you.
Yeah. And you see that's... Like, go back to, you remember sometimes we listen to like a Jordan Peterson, right? And you remember there's this thing that, in this society right now, we get placed in a position as men where we can't respond. We can't respond physically because, physically would be wrong because men naturally, build different to women, and we don't promote violence against women. And then something verbally, you respond, but they have the upper hand on that. So you can't even respond in no sort of way. Otherwise, you become toxic. So you can't respond. You can't respond. Otherwise, you might be considered toxic, and then we're going to a whole heap of, different dimensions, and then you can't respond the other way because it's totally wrong. It's not something that is,
Why can't you respond verbally though?
Well, you could respond. I mean, you could respond, but because how the structure is set up in society, something like right now in this present time, you could be considered toxic. So you don't even want to respond because you want to avoid the headache of it. You know what I mean? Because who you gonna be? That tit for tat game. That's a woman playground.
Yeah.
That's a woman's playground, man. Can't beat that.
And then, another thing that I've kind of discovered, or that comes as a pet peeve to some degree, is the inconsistency in certain behaviors. So, you may be in a relationship and your partner is very short. They have a very short fuse when it comes to you. They're very aggressive in their responses. They have a problem for every solution, a solution for every problem, and they have a response for everything. But that's in the relationship. Whereas you may be able to witness engagements in other facets or other areas of their life where they are a lot more tolerant, a lot more reserved, a lot more stable, a lot more deliberate with the way that they communicate with the external. So it's almost like internally there is a war, but externally they present this image of peace. And that inconsistency, for me personally, it rubs me the wrong way. Because if I feel like, listen, if you're an aggressive female, if you are a domineering female, if you're a female who feels like you are going to respond every time you feel slighted, okay. If that's what I've signed on for, I understand. But I'm totally opposed to it being the dynamic when you're communicating with me. But when you step outside, you present this image of this reserved, very civilized, very passive young woman. I can't really deal with it because it seems disingenuous to me. And it makes me feel like, okay, well, there must be something wrong with me.
It makes you feel like, like you said, something wrong with you. Like you don't exist you don't exist on the normal, human level as well. You're not a human, Because I give you a funny analogy, It's almost like picture a woman in a bank line going to make a deposit, right? And the bank is full of people, right? And let's say that she, for whatever reason, has a stomach ache.
Right.
And what's the fancy word for how you use them with the words?
Yeah, but why are we talking about flatulence?
Flatulence, okay. See?
No, but
No. Because that is our complacency. Complacency is that gross. It's that gross to me, right? So you would be in a line, and she would withhold that.
You're going all the way south, bro.
But then but in your presence at home,
right,
she feels that is all. She doesn't care. She feels comfortable, and there's a complacency.
That's a little bit different, though, to me.
To you?
Yeah, for me personally, that's a little bit different because, I mean, in the comfort of your home, that's like a biological reflex.
I got nose. I got nose.
I understand.
You ain't got nose?
No, I understand what you're saying. There should be some discretion, regardless of what it is, especially with that. But what I'm saying is, for me, that's a little bit different to being verbally disrespectful or being verbally aggressive with me over small matters.
Oh, no. I was just using that as an analogy to say, because that's it's like the same thing you're talking, like a verbal attack. Like, let's say you share at work and she's having a conversation. She would hold all of that,
Pent up
that
frustration.
pent up frustration.
Yeah, however she feels.
However she feel like she hold it in,
Right.
Because she wants everybody to see like she's civilized, like she don't operate in this sort of way.
Not sometimes it's not even wanting to be civilized, it's a fear of losing your job. Not wanting to present yourself as this confrontational person.
How people perceive you,
Right, and the job.
Yeah.
But at home, you're a little bit too comfortable,
Terrible.
so you're willing to say things that...
They fluctuate all over you.
Anyway, you're willing to say things that would make me uncomfortable. Whereas the stranger on the street or an acquaintance or somebody that you work with, you're not as willing to make them uncomfortable, even if they have outwardly disrespected you. You tend to be more reserved in dealing with them. That for me is a problem.
Because you have feelings too.
Yeah.
And sometimes women operate like men is a piece of log.
But I mean, on outside of the feelings, it doesn't bode well for the relationship.
No,
if
definitely not.
That's the way you choose to engage with me. And I can see that you're very tolerant of strangers, but you're not as tolerant with me. Then, because for me personally, I feel like if I am, let's say, I perceive a threat, or I perceive something as disrespect, the way I'm going to handle it externally is the way I would want to handle it internally.
But what I come to realize is that when you see people treat you, like a partner treat you that way, like in public they're one way, and in private they're that way, that just tells me that's how they treat themselves. That's something that the way that they rip in public, in private, that's how they treat themselves internally.
Psychologically. Like within the headspace.
And in the headspace. So like, if they're sitting on thinking by themselves,
right,
they're probably at themselves, like ripping away at themselves inside. So you being internal, being part of them in an intimate level, is almost like you become part of, their being. So they're actually attacking themselves by attacking you.
I'm not sure if I agree with that, because I feel like it's more you've become a straw man. And a straw man in the sense that because you're so close and they feel so secure and there isn't necessarily a fear of losing you, they tend to project all the frustrations and vent all the frustrations onto you.
But then you don't think that could tie into how they handle themselves when they're frustrated quietly, like you don't even know about? Like they might be disappointed with the action that they took or something they said or whatever, and they start ragging on themselves.
I mean, that's kind of subjective, because that's an abstract concept. I wouldn't be able to look into somebody's mental space. I mean, I understand where you're coming from. At the same time, it would be...
I mean, that not all the time, but that could also be part of it.
Yeah, it could be a trigger. It could be one of the reasons why they behave.
Because some people just, the other way I was talking to, like some people just have like a F grade when it comes to the way that they deal with situations, and no matter what you do, they're gonna just stay in an F grade in how they deal with you, So it's like no matter how much dialogue you have.
Yeah, because I mean they can only perceive things from their level of understanding.
Exactly.
Yeah. So if you're dealing with somebody that doesn't have the depth. I mean, you're drowning in shallow water. You really think about it. Yeah. And then the other thing that I've seen and I've experienced is because the feminine are so emotional, right? When they get wound up, when they start going, it's almost impossible for them to hear you. Doesn't matter what you're saying. It's almost impossible for them to hear you. So they don't necessarily listen to understand. The objective for them at that stage is just to respond. Even before you finish saying what you're saying, they already have a rebuttal. Yeah. They already know what they want to tell you. So everything that you are saying or trying to say, it just kind of floats above their head. And that's kind of difficult to deal with, So I feel like the communication needs to get a little bit better between the masculine and the feminine. Another thing that women tend to do is constantly bringing up the past.
Yeah.
So something might have happened 3 years ago in your relationship. And in your mind as the man, it's already resolved. That's not resolved. There's been no resolution.
But, let me just, put the stick a pin right there and probably come back with some more data on that next week. Because look at the time. We have just reached our first official hour of He Nuh, right? So,
Guys, we're on social media platforms, IG, He Nuh. You can get me at apex.medi on IG. And
and you can get me at IBA Byron and on IG.
yeah, send us your comments, send us your thoughts on the first show. We might include them in the second show, reference a few things. You might give us some ideas. So, it's important for us to hear from the listeners. In subsequent shows, we're definitely going to have the call-in features. So our guests will be able to call in, or our listeners, rather, will be able to call in and share your views, and we'll ventilate all these thoughts. Obviously from a masculine perspective, because that's the only perspective we can speak from.
Yeah. So thank you for joining.